My youngest daughter asked me, "Dad, how did you get another hobby?" This is pine pitch glue made from pine pitch and bear grease. These are leather vanes for a primitive weapon that I'm building. I think it started with the first flint knapping video that showed up in my YouTube feed. And so my thinking went something like this. That shouldn't be too hard to do. Chip a rock, make a point. My next thought was, what would be the simplest primitive weapon to make? As I can tell you right now, making a thin biface piece is what it's called. It's harder than you would think. Anyway, I thought the simplest primitive weapon to make would be a knife, right? How wrong was I? A knife blade requires the longest, so this way, and the thinnest biface piece. And turns out it's the hardest thing to make. The order goes like this. The easiest to make is an arrowhead, simply because when you start with a spall, it's called, of chert or obsidian or dacite, you have to reduce it to thin it. Here is a perfect comp. This piece, which was my breakthrough piece, my first decent thin biface piece. And this row here was some of my first attempts. And they're what you'd call clunkers. So I was getting pieces like this versus this. That is not a thin biface piece. But I was breaking rocks and learning. Probably been at it for a solid month. And based on what I was doing, I was thinking I'm going to have to make a bow and arrow because I couldn't make a spear point. No chance at making a knife. And struggling just to make arrowheads. I mean, they kind of look like an arrowhead, but they're not good pieces, right? So then I progressed to this point where I had started my bow build, and I had 3 pieces that were what I would call barely acceptable for stone point to haft onto a cane or a bamboo arrow. That's what it's called when you glue them on and bind them with sinew. And I have weights on here. So 126 grain, 1 inch cutting circle, 125 grain, 1 inch cutting circle, 118 grain, 1 inch cutting circle. You want all your arrowheads to be within 15 grains, so I did that and started building my bow. As I was building my bow, I was continuing to flint knap and progressed to better arrowheads. So this is more the shape I wanted, more taper. And then as far as always a thin biface, and you have to get them thin enough in the back so you can put your side notches on. Some of these side notches are not so good, my earlier stone tips, but here are the 3 that I've finished that I'm going to shoot. Hopefully harvest a white-tailed deer with these. And that took me down this journey of bow building. So this bow is done. I've shot it. Been force drying it right behind my wood stove. I also have 2 other bow builds going on for my 2 grandsons, oldest grandsons. But there is my finished bow. This is complete, except I still have a modern Dacron string on it. But yeah, I'll include a clip of me shooting it. The only other thing that's not primitive, if you will, I didn't tan moon leather. But yeah, for the grip and the strike plate where the arrow quiets the arrow down, where it runs across the bow. So this is going to be shoot off the knuckle, instinctive shooting. And I have successfully made a sinew string. My only issue with this sinew string is I got 2 thin spots that I don't trust for the poundage of my bow. So it's going to work out perfect for a 30 or 35 pound bow for my grandson. That's how you get another hobby. It's called a journey. That's how you get stuff like this going on. These are the backstrap tendons. So I have the tendons from 4 mature whitetails. That should be enough to make 2 more sinew bowstrings. So yes, I have harvested these from whitetails from this hunting season. I shot this one. These other 3 were from my cousin's boys' deer. These are not cheap. You want to buy these on Hunt Primitive website, just the dried backstrap tendons for 4 of them. So from 2 mature whitetails, $59.99. And a string, a sinew string, would be $129.99. And that's not any kind of a complaint about the price to buy a sinew bowstring. It's a lot of work involved with it, which I'm more than willing to do. Put in the time, make your own bowstrings. It's a pretty cool thing. So the concept being primitive weapons, everything comes from the earth. It's out there. You just have to have the creativity to pick things up off the ground, rocks and sticks, and harvest tendons from animals. Now coming back to the spear I was working on. Once you reach a point where you can make all the different biface pieces, knife, spear point, and arrowhead, yes, this is the simplest, most primitive weapon that will be capable of harvesting a white-tailed deer, if you care to do caveman stuff. So what I was doing is I've scribed these leather veins to fit along the spear shaft because you're working with wood. It's not a machine piece. You're just following the shape of the wood. And so I'm going to take the heat gun, glue these on, and then I have these slots cut in the leather here, and I'll bind them in the front and the back with sinew. I have the leather veins glued on with the pine pitch glue. And so now I have harvested a bunch of sinew from the Achilles tendon of a deer. I'm going to use these pieces here. We're going to bind both ends where I have the slots cut in the veins with these tendons. So when it dries, then it's referred to as sinew. Show you that when I get it done. I'll trim that off after it dries. I run it underneath itself, so then that self glue will tighten right up. Got both sides bound, and lastly we'll put some pine pitch glue in these cuts that I made for the sinew. So yeah, there is the veins that are wrapped with sinew. Same here. This dries, I'll cut that tag end off, and the primitive spear will be done. Here's what it looks like with everything done. I have filled in the cuts in the leather with pine pitch glue, and now that the sinew is dried, it has its own glue. You just wrap it underneath. When it shrinks, it just binds tight. Will not come undone. Anyway, to answer my daughter's question, how did I end up with another hobby? Maybe the way to put it would be, it's in the making. I enjoy making things with my hands, creating things, and then using them. Things I can use, things that have value.